Good afternoon. And thank you for joining us. I'm still John Lippincott, president of CASE, and delighted to welcome you to this very special session. Before I introduce our speakers, I'd like to thank our sponsor for this session, Blackbaud. Blackbaud partners with universities, colleges, and foundations to help them secure funding, demonstrate accountability, and build strong relationships with alumni, students, parents, and supporters. You can learn more about their services by stopping by their booth next door. Would the representatives of Blackbaud please stand, and would all of you join me in thanking them for their sponsorship? Now it's my great privilege to introduce this afternoon's keynote session, featuring an unscripted interview with one of America's leading philanthropists by one of America's leading journalists. Let me begin by introducing the philanthropist. David Rubenstein is co-founder and managing director of the Carlyle Group, the third largest private equity firm in the world. At least that was as of 2011. Still true today, David? Biggest. Okay, there we go. Let me start over again. Director of the Carlyle Group, the biggest private equity firm in the world. In 2010, the Financial Times named Carlyle the private equity firm of the year. Prior to forming the Carlyle Group in 1987, Mr. Rubenstein was a domestic policy advisor to President Jimmy Carter and practiced law here in Washington, D.C. Mr. Rubenstein is active in numerous civic and cultural endeavors, serving as a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, as chair of the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, and as a regent of the Smithsonian Institution. He has loaned a copy of the Magna Carta to the National Archives, contributed to the restoration of the Washington Monument following last year's earthquake, and sponsored the giant panda habitat at the National Zoo. David is among the group of philanthropists who have committed to donate the majority of their wealth to charitable causes as part of the Giving Pledge. He is also a great friend of higher education, and I will have a bit more to say about that at the close of this session. So would you please join me in welcoming David Rubenstein. And now I'd like to introduce our journalist. For millions of commuters like myself, Bob Edwards was our co-pilot. From 1974 to 1979, he accompanied us on our evening commutes as the co-host of NPR's news magazine, All Things Considered. He then joined us on the morning commute as host of Morning Edition for 25 years. In 2004, he signed on with Sirius XM Radio, where he hosts the Bob Edwards Show and Bob Edwards Weekend, which airs on public radio stations. Bob is the author of 3 books and has won a George Foster Peabody Award for Excellence in Broadcasting, as well as the Edward R. Murrow Award for Outstanding Contributions to Public Radio. In 2004, he was inducted into the National Radio Hall of Fame. And among all of his honors and distinctions, perhaps the most significant is that he has won 3 trophies in the last 6 seasons as first baseman for softball team Gang Green. Please welcome Bob Edwards. Bob, take it away.
Oh, I'm on. Okay. Well, it's great to see you all here. You really packed it in after. Do you all know you missed the budget report? It was scintillating. Thank you for letting me participate here, and thank you for agreeing to share the stage.
My pleasure.
Here's how big Carlyle is. We were waiting to come on. Mr. Rubenstein left the room, and I made a little joke when he came back. Ha ha, bought another company. Huh? He says, bought it and sold it. So that's who we're dealing with here today. They left out a few items in your introduction that interest me enormously. You were not born into philanthropy. You come from relatively modest circumstances.
Yes. My parents both did not go to college, nor did they graduate from high school. I grew up in a very cloistered part of Baltimore, D.C., Baltimore, Maryland, and Baltimore was light years away from D.C., where I now live. But in Baltimore, the Jewish population was forbidden to live other than in certain areas because mortgages forbade you to sell a home to somebody who was Jewish or black. And so we lived in a relatively narrow area. My father worked his entire career in the post office, made no more than $8,000 a year. I'm an only child. So I realized that if I was going to get anywhere in life, I had to do it probably on my own and not through family connections. And probably I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't gotten scholarships to go to college at Duke and to law school at the University of Chicago. So I'm very fortunate. Generally, I think that people who are very fortunate in life have some obligation to give back to their community or their country. And I've tried to do that, not as well as I think I should have, but I'm trying now in the years that I have remaining available to me to do this. And so that's my goal. I wish I could do more than I have done, and I hope to be able to do much more than I have done already to date, but I really am interested in trying to give back and show my appreciation for the good fortune that has come to me by virtue of what's happened to me, and to give back to my country and my community.
You had a line once, you said that you got to high school before you realized that not everyone was Jewish.
Well, yes. I grew up in Baltimore, and as I said, it's a very narrow area, and I was about 13 before I realized everybody in the world isn't Jewish, because everybody in this little area was Jewish. After 13, I realized virtually nobody's Jewish, because it was different. But today, the Jewish population of the United States, when I ask people what percentage they think it is, they would say, oh, 5%, 10%, but it's actually 2%. And it's 0.2% of the entire world, but you consider the accomplishments of some people who are Jewish, people think it's actually a much larger population.
So not having had magnificent circumstances as a kid, one would think you'd want to hold on to it. Well, and you're giving it away.
First, people come to me all the time and say, well, you're doing a great thing, you're giving away money, but it's not like you have that many choices, because when you get to a certain point, you can either give it to your children, and there's no evidence that giving your children $100 million, $500 million, or $1 billion makes them better people. Very few people have won Nobel Prizes having inherited a $500 million. In other words, the people that do great things for humanity are rarely people that inherit enormous sums. Now, obviously, some people inherit money and they do great things, but by and large, the people that do the great things in the world are people that came from modest or lower income circumstances. So I don't want to ruin my children's life by giving them enormous amounts of money. So if you say you're going to give a certain amount to your children, but not so much to ruin them, you can either spend the money, and there's no evidence that spending the money produces greater happiness, right? So you can therefore give the money away, but giving it away is complicated. You have to find something that's appropriate. You want to make sure you're having some impact. So I am trying to find appropriate things, and you know, it's trite to say, but it's easier to make the money than give it away, as people who have money to give it away completely agree with. It's just not that easy to find appropriate things. You know, you could also, I suspect, be buried with the money. You know, the ancient Egyptian pharaohs said, let's take my money and be buried with it, but there's no evidence that you actually need this money in the afterlife, so I've concluded that in the end, you're best to kind of give it away. And what I want to do, though, is give it away while I'm alive. There are many very wealthy people who just can't part with the money while they are alive, and so they will give money away when they die. And I just don't think you get the pleasure of seeing what you've done with the money when you're gone. Maybe there's some way you can figure out what the benefit is after you're gone, but I think it's not clear. So I tell people that if you're going to give away money and philanthropy, there are probably 3 real reasons to do so. Number one, you will feel better about yourself because nobody who gives away money actually says afterwards, geez, I really hate myself for having given away this money. I feel like I'm a terrible person for having done this. You feel better about yourself, and therefore maybe you'll live longer. So selfishly, you might live longer because people who feel good about themselves tend to live longer. Secondly, you might actually help other people, and it's a natural human instinct to help other people. And while everything you do when you give away money won't necessarily help people, some things might, and why not try? And third, maybe you'll get to heaven more quickly. You never know, but why take a chance? So I also want to remind people, though, that everybody in this audience can be a philanthropist, and maybe many of you already are. In fact, maybe everybody is, because the word philanthropy is an ancient Greek word for loving humanity. It has nothing to do with billionaires giving away their money. The Giving Pledge is a very good thing to focus attention on philanthropy, and I think maybe 75 or 80 Americans so far have signed it. It's the project that Bill Gates and Melinda Gates and Warren Buffett have developed. But philanthropy doesn't mean that you have to give away money. Unfortunately, the list of great philanthropists lists how much money you give away. If you give away your time and your energy and your ideas, you're a philanthropist as well, because you're helping humanity, you're helping other people. So I want everybody to feel that they can be a philanthropist even if you're not extremely wealthy. And so I really encourage everybody to not just focus on giving away money, though that's important if you have the ability to do so, but do what you can to help other people. I think that's generally an American tradition. Unfortunately, the tradition doesn't exist as much outside the United States as it does in the United States. We are by far the greatest philanthropists in the world in terms of money, and also I think other types of volunteer activities and so forth. Other countries have a long way to go to catch up to us.
Have your children urged you to get a second opinion on that?
Well, it's a complicated subject. When we have meetings of the Giving Pledge people, a large amounts of the time is devoted to what you do with your children. How do you get your children to appreciate that they shouldn't inherit all this money, and how can they become people interested in philanthropy as well? And it's a complicated subject, and while I like to make light of it, the truth is there's no perfect answer. There's no perfect way to figure out how you get your children to realize that this is actually in their best interest. In my view, I grew up in a very advantaged upbringing. You can't